of 1942. And I joined the Navy in November 11th, 1942. And we both went to the Great Lakes, and we both went to Navy Pier in Chicago and went to school there for aviation machinist mates. And Joe from Navy Pier, Joe went to Lakehurst, New Jersey, and got into lighter than air blimps. And they would patrol convoys as they went out. They would fly for 24 hours and 3 days like that, and then they'd get 3 or 4 days off. And him and John Cereza were together. And later he went to South America. He split up with John Cereza, and he went to South America, to Brazil. And they crashed in the mountainside one time while he was on patrol there, and in a jungle like. And one of the guys had a broken leg, so he had to stay in the jungle with the guy until.
That ain't the way I heard it. He was one of them that was able to move around, and he had the axe, and he said he kept chopping and chopping. It looked like that forest was growing up behind him.
He had to stay there back with the one guy that got hurt, and some made their way, and there was natives there, and they were peeking in all the time. Of course, they had guns in the blimp, but these natives wouldn't come close. They just looked through the weeds there, you know. And the pilot didn't get hurt, and him and there usually was about 5 guys on a crew, and they made their way inland, and then they finally come back and got him. And then, while he was in South America, he put in for pilot's training, and he was accepted. And then he came back to the States, and he started pilot's training. He went all the way through until he was ready to get his wings. But if he would have got his wings, he was going through as an enlisted man. He would have had to sign up for another 4 years. So he didn't want to stay another 4 years. Plus the fact there was a lot of them getting killed because all the trained people were getting out that took care of the planes, and there was a lot of young guys crashing. Every day he said they were losing somebody. So he decided to get out, but he only had about 4 weeks of training left, and then he would have been got his wings.
Well, while we're on that story, I want to tell about Ma. I always said my mom was psychic, not about all things, but about her kids. She knew what was going on with them. When I was at home at the time, when his blimp hit the mountain, Ma told me that she thought it was an airplane. Joe hit, their thing hit the mountain. She really did tell me that. And she says that there was a lot of trees around there and everything. And I said, oh Ma, you dreamt that, and I wouldn't believe it until Joe then came home and told us that it really did happen.
Yeah,
and I'll never forget another thing she was psychic about. When I was in California and I was living with Pat, you know, we always shared apartments and that.
yeah.
Well, she smoked, and her mother smoked. And her mother came to visit her, and they wanted me to smoke, and I said, no, I don't like cigarettes. And she said, oh, come on, try it. So I lit up a cigarette and smoked. And now this was months and months later that I came home. Mom met me on the porch and pointed the finger at me. She said, I saw you in California and you were smoking.
Well, anyhow, Joe finished his Navy career.
But he got hurt on that racehorse, broke it. He was getting ready to go back, wasn't he?
Well, let me finish the story. He got out of the Navy because he didn't want to stay in there another 4 years. So he come out, and then he found out there was nothing doing around Bunnell, so he decided he was going to go back in.
Because of incentives, they wouldn't have paid.
Well, they give you had 90 days to get back in.
With incentives.
He could have gone right back in and finished his training, and the guy his officer told him if he finished that with his grades he could get into Annapolis and go on to college, because he kept telling his officer that he wanted to go to college, and his officer said, well, I can get you in Annapolis with your grades. And anyhow,
he was very good in school.
He went to St. Louis, and they sent him, said he would have to go to Chicago because he would belong to the 9th Naval District. And in the meantime, a day or so later, he was riding a horse that...
When he stopped, the East Side gang was celebrating. Everybody was home.
Yeah.
There was about 20 guys by Czars, and they were running this racehorse. It belonged to Bob Furt. Bob Furt had the slot machine.
Yeah, he won this horse or something. It was a gaited horse, and everybody that rode him different. And anyhow, Joe was riding him down the Royal Road from the Czars, just a block away. And the horse fell and crushed his leg, crushed his ankle with the stirrup. And it busted in the, so then that was out. And in the meantime, he had also went to Rolla and was accepted with a scholarship to play football. You know, neither one panned out because he broke his leg, but he did go to Rolla the second semester and started school
On a GI Bill.
on a GI Bill. And he finished in 3 years and a half on his degree.
Mechanical engineering.
41, when I got out of school, my friend Steve Turpak was living in Chicago, and he was writing to me, and he wanted me to come there, and I was fed up with milking cows, so I told my dad, get rid of those cows, because the day after I graduate, I'm leaving. And I graduated on a Friday. On Sunday morning, I was on a bus and went to Chicago. And I lived with Steve for a while, then I moved with another fella from Bunnell. Later on, we all lived in an apartment on the south side. Steve and me and Muzzy had an apartment with Tony Triplo. And at that time, my brother Joe was there, and a lot of fellas from Bunnell.
Where'd you stay in Chicago?
The first hotel I stood in with Steve was the New Michigan Hotel, which was the hotel that Al Capone lived in when he was there. And that same hotel that they had on television, where they were digging in the basement to find that same hotel. And it was on 22nd and Michigan Avenue. And then we all moved to the south side on 63rd Street. And we all hung around the same tavern there, a tavern named Frankie and Johnny. All the guys from Bunnell hung around there, and girls that lived in Chicago. And after I worked there about a year and a half or so, and I quit and came back. The war had started already in December. And that fall I quit, and Bob and I and Muzzy went to work in Springfield. And we worked at an ammunition place. Bob worked in one place, and Muzzy and I worked on a railroad, putting in railroad. And soon after that, Steve quit Chicago, and he was going to get drafted. So him, Steve, and Muzzy and I joined the Navy together. And we all three left from Bunnell together and went to Great Lakes together. And we split up when we chose our school. I chose aviation machinist mate, and so did Muzzy, and Steve chose aviation gunner's mate, because his cousin Nick Agnish was a gunner's mate in the Navy, so he chose that line. So we got split up there, and Muzzy and I went to Navy Pier in Chicago and went to school, and we were there with Joe for the last month of Joe's schooling there. And from there I went to Memphis.
You can come in.
Went to Memphis, and in Memphis went to radar school, and from radar school I went to Alameda. In Alameda they sent me down to Monterey. In Monterey I spent a good part of the war there, about 16 months, doing odd jobs, and then every kind of work you could think of, like planting grass and making parking lots, nothing pertaining to the war. And it was very good duty, and it's probably the best part of the country. And I spent 16 months there. Then I was shipped back to Alameda, and from Alameda I went to let's see, Washington, Tacoma, Washington, and got on a brand new small carrier. And from there, I went, made my way through Hawaii and Kwajalein and Okinawa and into Japan, and I was in Tokyo Bay when they signed the armistice.
No, Raymond was there too.
And then the war ended, and we came back to the States, and I got out of the Navy. And now Bob could talk about his career when he graduated, and you went to Chicago, and how you went to college and played football.
Well, when I graduated from high school, we went to Chicago. Me, Cabby, Wendy, Ebbets, Burnout Brothers, a bunch of guys from the east side. And we had an apartment on the north side of Chicago. And lived together right near Lincoln Park. And one time there was a man, I think he was Italian, was selling hot dogs and hot chestnuts about a half a block from our apartment, and some young tugs were milking him dry, you know, making him pay off. So four of us big guys from the east side who told these guys, if we ever catch you doing this, again, we're going to really beat you up, you know. So that went by, and then one day we come home, and one of our friends, McCallus, Yubbets, he was all beat up. Well, these guys caught him by himself, and they beat the heck out of him. And so that went by. We never. And then later on, in a week or so, I disappeared because I went and stopped at the eye doctor and throat doctor, and I had my tonsils pulled. I had to stay overnight or so, and these guys didn't know where I was. So they thought this gang got after me. And they were looking all over. I think they even called the police department and everything. But then I finally came home and they gave me a bunch of hell, you know. But same old East Side bunch. We were out for fun to go see the big bands. All the joints, you know, Kitty Davis's, remember? Yeah. That was a big popular spot there in the early days. And Wendy and I played baseball at one of the industrial leagues. But I wasn't much as good as Wendy. Wendy was a good ball player. And sooner or later, there's a whole bunch of East Siders around Chicago. And later on, we used to hang around Frankie's and Johnny's on the south side, which was a relation to the Zora family. And we had a lot of good times in there. And
then, you know how you got laid off, you come home and you got that chance to go to Washington.
Oh yeah, well then I worked in the steel mills with a good friend of my father's. Got me a job in Carnegie Alloy Steel. And it was an easy job. They were starting, this was 1938, they were starting to rebuild the huge furnaces at Inland Steel. I think they were preparing already to help the Allies that were fighting already, you know, in 38. So I come home that summer, and Jimmy Conzelman used to hang around Zibioski. He was the head coach, and he was a famous coach, and played with some of the best teams of the pro teams in his youth. So he asked me if I wanted to go to college at Washington U, and I went. Me and a few other boys from our hometown in the area. And we had a pretty good team the first couple of years. And then I was getting ready to go back to school, and a couple of carloads of us guys were coming from, East Side guys were coming from Hillsboro, where we'd been to Old Settlers Picnic. And we stopped along with the old 66 on kind of repairing the roads, and a car hit us from behind. And one of the East Siders, Louis Panico, we called him after the band leader, but because he played clarinet, but his name was Paul Guima. And there you go, a nickname. His name's Paul, we're calling him Louis Panico. Well, he got killed, and I was seriously injured and burned. I was in the hospital for how long? About 6, 8 months?
About 6 months, I guess.
And from there, even though I had my schooling paid for, the war broke out, and I got 4F in the hospital. And then I recuperated around home. Then when I was well enough, I went to work in Springfield with Aldo, where they were building munition dumps.
Yeah.
And then Aldo, you joined the Navy from right after that, didn't you?
Right. You stood there.
Then I stood there. Then I went to Chicago. We're working, building Sherman tanks, and later B-29 engines, machine shop work. And that's how I became a machinist from then on.
And that's also where you got picked up because you didn't have your card with you.
Oh yeah, I was picked up again.
You went to eat, didn't you?
You went
Yeah,
to eat.
well, I was booking bets. I
Yeah.
was.
But you didn't have your card with
Well,
you.
let me tell the whole story.
Oh.
Andy, Kai, Paul, Zach, and I, we were working for Dodge Chrysler Corporation, building B-29 engines, which were in demand. And the syndicate bookie was working in there, and he sort of hired me and Kai to pick up bets for him. And we were picking bets, and we were getting 10 cents on the dollar off the top. And sometimes I would pick $700 and $800 a day, and I would get $70 before I gave him the money. And Kai about the same. Kai was picking up less, about $400. And then we'd give them to the syndicate man, and he'd pay us off, even though it won or lost. And then later on, I started holding the bets, and I was doing the actually booking, and I would only give the syndicate man the bigger bets, you know. So I would start making about $200 or $300 a day, and that was when $1 an hour was big money. So, and every night we'd be out in the Shapery, Kitty Davis's, come home, change clothes, and go to work. It was nothing but party every night. And how the hell we did it, we'd always come home and say, well, we ain't going out tonight. So we'd eat early and lay down and get up at 10 and we'd be gone. Come home, change clothes. And we'd go to a little club, all the big shows downtown. Yeah, we did that. And all the guys would come in, like Duds, we'd go out, or Joe come in, we went to see Louis Prima downtown at the Panther Room.
But I wanted you to tell about how you left your room to go across the street to eat.
Well, yes.
And you got picked up by the police. They wanted
Well,
to
I walked into this bookie, which I knew the owner, and I used to lay off bets. And I walked in there when they were paying off the police in the unmarked car. There was 4 guys in this huge unmarked police car. So they thought probably I seen something. So the next day, it was a Sunday, and a half a block from where I lived, and I walked into this restaurant, and when I come out, they stopped me. And I asked them, well, state your business. What do you want with me? And they showed me their badges. They said, well, we're undercover cops, and we want to know if you got your papers.
why you weren't in the service.
Yeah, why I'm not in the service. I said, I got all my paperwork. I didn't bring my wallet. I just brought some change. I used to carry money loose and money in my wallet. He said, I left my wallet on the dresser. I live 1/2 block away. I said, let's go and get it. He said, no, you haven't got it with you. You got to go to jail. And they put me in jail.
In federal jail.
No, it wasn't on jail there, right in the neighborhood. So there was when I was in jail in the early afternoon, there was one guy, a colored man, was leaving because he had bailed out. And so I told him, I gave him and Sobot's name, who ran the Frankie's and Johnny's Club, to let him know I was in jail, to let my friends know.
Stanley Pavis too was living with you.
Yeah, Stanley Pavis was living with me. So I told them to get in touch with Ann. And Ann Sobot come over to the jail. It cost her $20 just to get a meal to me. She bought me a big supper and had to tip the guy $20 and one of them guys at the desk so she could bring the meal. And you're talking about bed bugs. The next day I was
Covered with them.
I was covered with bed bugs and everything. And I had told Ann Sobot to call Dodge Chrysler to let them know where I was, because there was one guy from Washington U was in the FBI. So it was this guy from Washington U that got me out of the whole mess.
They called the mail bank and everything.
Well, I forget what they did.
Where to verify, because you look like a healthy, strapping guy. You wouldn't tell them.
I couldn't. They left everything in there. But
Yeah,
this guy from the FBI must have done the checking, because
because then when they asked you after you got released, what was wrong with you? And you wouldn't tell him. You was madder than hell at him, and you wouldn't tell him.
Well, I thought they picked me up because they knew I seen him in the bookie joint collecting money. That's what I thought.
So anyhow, you come in with those bed bugs. They made you take your clothes off at Helen Czar's, where I was living.
Yeah.
By that time, I was following Raymond in the service, and I was in
I was
Chicago.
all bit up. Boy,
They made you take all your clothes off up there because they wouldn't let you come in.
Charles Garino in Italian was Carlo Garino.
Okay, in case we ever do any research, Bobby and Terry and Jill and John and Chuck, because everybody eventually is going to get a copy of this.
Okay, that's about it. And
So what about Noni? Dominica, I know that.
Leone.
Dominica, but does she have a middle initial or anything?
No,
Domenica
her
Leone.
name was, well, it's really, we called it Domenica, but you know when they made that song with that nun, it's Dominica, remember?
Dominica.
But she went by the name of Kina.
Kina was her nickname.
Kina was her nickname.
She even had a nickname from Italy, Kina.
Yeah, Kina.
Well, that was a nickname for Domenica, because there was another Domenica they called Kina too.
Yeah.
And
So,
in the 20s, during Prohibition, Banal was the center of activity for all the liquor that was being produced for a lot of Illinois. Illegally. We had some 7 stills run by Southern Italians that were connected with the Capones out of Chicago. And back in the timbers, wherever there was a creek or anything where they could get their water. And these were enormous stills that produced grain alcohol. And sugar was hauled into Banal by the carloads.
Like from Kansas City.
Came from Kansas City. They used both the white and the brown sugar to make this whiskey.
And the corn sugar, the yellow corn sugar too.
And yellow corn sugar, I guess. And a lot of the kids in Banal got jobs working in these stills and that. And towards the end of the 20s, the revenue men started coming in and started knocking these stills out one at a time. And the biggest one was knocked out, I could remember. You could hear it when they blew it up all the way in town. You could see the fire from in town. That's how big it was. at that time, we had all through there, we had the speakeasies where they sold beer, like the Prosperity Club. They always got
Jasper's,
Jasper.
Cordera's,
They all had
Newton
ways
Hotel.
where you could go in there and get wine, and you could get beer, homemade beer, and homemade whiskey. I mean, this bootleg whiskey. And so, Bunnell never did close up, even though it was prohibition. It was always closed up.
Wide open.
I mean, wide open. And
How long did that last?
All through the 20s
all
and
through
the
the
early
20s.
30s.
that's when they used to say that Bunnell was the jelly factory, had a big jelly factory there because all the grapes used to come in, but it was actually wine coming in. And then
Wine grapes coming in.
they finally knocked all the stills out, but then Roosevelt come in '33 and brought the beer back. Bunnell became, again, the center of activity with 36 taverns, and a good half of them were Hossaville famed, with girls in them, and every tavern had slots, and all the nightclubs, we had two or three nightclubs that had crap games. We had a big dance hall that had a crap game, and they had all the big bands coming there, Terrell's Hall, and Bunnell was looked like a city on a Saturday night when everybody came in from all over the county and St. Louis, and all came in there for entertainment, and the town would be wide open till early in the morning and would never close. In fact, it was always open on Saturday nights till Sunday morning, and things lasted all the way through the war and on into the early 50s, and finally.
And you know, we never had any problems with them, even with those guys from that gang, molesting girls or anything.
No.
No, they let you alone. You know, you let them alone, they let you alone.
Even though Bunnell had all these houses of ill fame, prostitute houses, Bunnell High School, Bertetti talked to us at a reunion, and he said he was the head of the high school for 50 years while it was there, almost the whole 50 years, and that he could count on his hand how many girls became pregnant during the 50 years. He said there wasn't even 5. And he said that the bishop used to come in from Springfield and wonder why Bunnell had no problem with the girls, you know. And he said of all places, Bunnell had a reputation as being a rough and tumble town, wide open and all that. And he said, how come you don't have any problems with your girls here, you know? And Bertetti, the only thing he could tell him, he said, because of the strict foreign-born parents that Bunnell had. You know, they were all European parents there that guarded especially their women, the girls.
Well, you didn't dare get in trouble. You got kicked out of the house and killed.
But there was some fights with the bootleggers. One time our good friend Wabbs at the Prosperity Club, they have dancers upstairs. He got in a fight with 2 of these bootleggers, and he come downstairs and got 2 rolls of dimes to put in his hand to give him power. And he was a pretty good boxer. He fought a little bit in the ring, and he cocked this gangster and knocked him down. And then they chased him, him and his friend. They chased him down the stairs, and he slammed the door, and one of these bootleggers, he knocked the tip of his finger off. And then they were looking for Wabbs, and from then on he carried an automatic in his pistol. But the Croatian Lodge held a meeting, and went over to the head of this gang that ran the bootlegging and the stills, and told him, he says, if you guys ever bother this young man, Wabbs, he says, we'll be after you tooth and nail. And so the head of the man, I forget his name, but my cousin Tony told me, I can't remember his name now, but he got rid of these 2 young men that were after Wabbs and shipped them out of town and never came back. But there were other episodes where, but they were